We need to hear a lot of very well-informed voices about the situation in South Africa, what we're doing right and especially what we're doing wrong, because at the moment there's enough going wrong. So I've got an old friend of State of the Nation back again, somebody who hasn't been here for a while, and that is the well-known political commentator, author, contributor to opinion pieces, Phumlani Majosi. Phumlani, welcome back to State of the Nation.
Mike, it's great to see you. I'm glad this program of yours it's growing. It's doing well.
It's great. We're going to take
Well
over
done.
the world. The last time we were here, you were talking about your book, and well
Yes,
done
yeah.
on the book. That's
Thank
done
you.
very,
Thank you.
very well.
Yeah,
And I know that you've even been speaking internationally.
Yes.
I see you
Yeah.
bloody jet setter and all over in the great big capitals of the world.
Yeah.
Let's kick off with the world in South Africa,
Yeah.
because somebody like yourself has been out there. And South Africa, at the moment, depending on where you sit, we're having a problem with the world, and certainly certain parts of the world.
Yeah.
And obviously, the big news has been what one can only call is the breakdown in our relationship with the US, which, depending on which side of the fence you sit, is either a good thing or a bad thing. How do you view the South Africa-US situation?
Well, I'm quite concerned. Well, not quite. I am concerned, Mike, because I think with the US, it's one country where I believe we need to get things right. My view has been that this thing was on the build-up. People say the problem is Trump. I don't think so. There were events that were building up to a point where there was a president who said, look, South Africa must choose. Is it aligning itself with the Irans of the world, with the Chinas of the world, or is it really doing things that we as the US are comfortable with? The idea that it is Trump, I think it's misguided, because even before Trump, during the Biden administration, how South Africa was conducting itself on the global stage in terms of policy, it was becoming a bipartisan issue in the corridors of the Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Right?
Yeah.
It was, you want to say?
We mustn't forget that Reuben Brigady, when he was ambassador here under the Biden administration, has got long credentials of being on the American left, if we want to call it that. And the Lady R thing came out, what was it, about nearly 2 years back, where we were supplying arms to Russia and denying it, and then he said he put his life on it. Right? Old Ambassador Brigady as he was at the time, and he was prepared to go that far. And here was a guy who you've got to say was should have been South Africa's wet dream. He'd been a human rights lawyer, he'd been all this kind of thing. So highly unlikely that he was just doing this to spite South Africa. There must have been some clear evidence. So as you say, we shouldn't get confused and call this a Donald Trump issue.
No, we shouldn't, Mike. And I think it's dangerous to put it like that. So there's that, and then there is also the military drills that we have been engaged with China and Russia at the height of tensions between Russia and the US, or between Russia and the West over Ukraine, right? You could be talking about the ICJ case, South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. Some people may say, well, that issue South Africa is doing is pushing for human rights and so on. But at the end of the day, Mike, this is a geopolitics issue. For the United States, it does matter because Israel is the closest ally of the United States. So there has been a big segment within the United States that has been concerned about South Africa's conduct on the global stage. Now, the relations between South Africa and the US were already being reviewed during the Biden administration, right? In Washington D.C. So by the time Trump comes in, he gets he now already has an issue or an excuse, at least in his view, to say this is how I'm going to pin South Africa, right? As you do know, the first statesman to visit Washington D.C. when Trump took over was who? Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. It was a few days he spent with them. It was and they did demonstrate that they have a very strong relationship. Trump has been pushing very hard, sending more arms to Israel. So I guess I have said, Mike, in that week when Netanyahu was in Washington, D.C., definitely South Africa was discussed. What do we do about South Africa, right? So my view has been this thing has been on the build-up. So Trump came, at a time where he said, look, I'm going to represent my people in the U.S. and I'm going to take a stance on South Africa. And then under that, then we are going to have things like race-based policies that Trump has complained about, the farm matters in the country. But on foreign policy, I think that this thing was on the build-up. We are now where we are. And I do believe that the concerns of the U.S. or some segments, well, it's not everybody in the U.S. who says South Africa is anti-America on the global stage. Of course, there are voices whom some will argue that they're in the Democratic Party who say, look, South Africa is doing okay. But there is a big segment in the U.S., and I think their concerns, we shouldn't dismiss them as South Africans. Because I think there is some legitimacy from their part, and I think we need to start thinking as to move forward how we improve our relations with them.
Yeah, because, I think what Donald Trump does that leaders generally tend to avoid doing, and that is, that awkward moment when you sort of having dinner with somebody and some of the sauce goes down the side of your mouth, and everybody's like too polite to tell you. He's that kind of guy that says, listen, you do know that you've got mayonnaise going down the side of your face. And we don't like it, but it doesn't mean that this is the first time this is the first time we've had mayonnaise on our face, right? It's just those leaders are being too polite to say anything about it. And those European leaders will smile and wave. Now, you've been, as we said, you've been to a lot of global conferences, you've been around, and, before we leave the situation of South Africa's foreign relations, by your observations, which countries do you think play the game well of international relations? If South Africa shouldn't be behaving the way we're doing, do you have an idea of which countries we should be looking at that do handle, the US well, China well, their own interests well?
That's a very, very good question. The thing is, when it comes to international affairs, you have to understand that nations pursue their interests, right?
Well, other nations,
exactly. So they pursue their interests. And I have been posting on X recently, and I think I did write in one of my Politics Web columns that I think India has been smart, Narendra Modi, in terms of being able to really to play the game, especially when it comes to Trump, right? He understands how to handle Trump. I'm talking more about India since it's a developing world with huge challenges, right? In fact, some people have argued that the levels of poverty in India is not what we have in South Africa, right? It's a huge population. I think Narendra Modi has been quite smart in being able to handle Trump. Now, there is already I wouldn't call it tensions, but Trump is talking about India's, tariffs, that he wants to impose tariffs on India as well. So that issue of trade between the U.S. and India is coming through as well now. But I think even given that situation, Narendra Modi has been able to work with countries like China. He's in the BRICS. He's been able to work with. I saw Farid Zakaria the other day of CNN who said, look, Narendra Modi still has to, if he has to deal with Iran in terms of oil trade and so on, he could still do that. He's met Putin as well. He's been to Israel, Narendra Modi. So he knows how to play the game. You've got to be smart in this thing, that you don't want to come out as somebody who takes a certain side, especially when you know that this is a contentious issue and you push through in the name of, well, it's we are pro-human rights and so on. I think from a developing world perspective, Narendra Modi has been quite good. We can learn a lot from him in terms of how to handle your engagement with China, with the US, with Russia and other nations, while ensuring that you're still, friends with Trump. at least to a greater extent.
And we must remember, he was the second. You mentioned Benjamin Netanyahu being the first.
Yes, he was
to,
the second.
To
Think
Donald
about
Trump.
that,
He was
Mike.
number two.
Yeah.
He goes out there and then just to show that how smart they've been with their international affairs. When everybody was boycotting Russian oil, he was buying the cheap Russian oil for India.
He was doing all those things. But
so they've definitely used the international relations for the benefit of their country. And
but smartly, though, because they've known where to not touch on issues that are too sensitive to the United States, right? And one of the things I said not long time ago, Mike, was that there's something very interesting, and that is, even though there are issues with various countries, well, between Trump and various countries, between Trump and Canada, between Trump and Mexico, between Trump and the EU, between Trump and China, as he has been imposing tariffs. But Trump hasn't gone to a situation where he is firing ambassadors of those countries, right? Cutting off those countries. He's still engaging them. Even though there are some serious disagreements, he's still engaging those countries. But why us? Why with us he doesn't want to talk? He's shutting the door on the ANC, our leaders. He doesn't want to talk, and it looks like it could really do more during the course of the year. It could be in terms of sanctions. It could be in terms of kicking us out of AGOA. We don't know. But why us? And he could still work with those countries, even though there are disagreements. But it doesn't shut them out. With us, it seems like we are his target. Why is that? And that's what I want people to think about.
Yeah, look, I think that it doesn't help that he's surrounded himself with a whole lot of ex-South Africans that are, do have a particular vision of South Africa. And of course, it couldn't have helped our cause that just months before Donald Trump won the election, that Starlink was stopped from rolling out their high-speed, low-cost internet because the ANC wanted a share of Starlink. So
let's talk about that, Mike. That's a very important matter you have raised, right? Because when you look at, I'm on X, right? You look at the post by Elon Musk, you can see that he is very much hard on South Africa. There are things I don't agree with him on, but many of the things he's raising, they are concerning as well. But he has been hitting hard on the race-based thing, right? That he can't invest with Starlink in South Africa because of race-based policies. Now, you know my work. You've followed me for a while. You've read my book. I'm very much opposed to these race-based policies. I'm not against investing in the previously disadvantaged, black people especially, investing in their skills, entrepreneurship. I'm not against that, Mike. But I'm against with this idea that to do that, you need to somehow make it hard for white people who are less than 8% of the population in this country to operate in the economy. You can still address the needs of the majority, most of whom are black, right? Without having this race-based policies. So, to really the Starlink thing also and the race-based policies, they are becoming a highlight at a time when the White House is with Donald Trump now, who's working with Elon Musk. You are blocking Elon Musk from investing in South Africa over what exactly? Over race-based policies, and that he has to work with black people to invest here. Most of those black people, by the way, will not be black people from Alex that Elon Musk will be working with. It will be black people from the black elite,
house,
from the Tuli house, or who somehow are connected to top politicians, Mike. How is that beneficial? If you were to tell Elon Musk and say to him, look, the people you will be working with, the black people you will be working with, are black people from Alex, black people from Deep Sloot, these are poor places, I wonder if he would say no.
Absolutely. And of course, the burning question becomes, what problem are we trying to solve here?
Yeah.
Because if the problem we're trying to solve is poverty, you'd imagine that by having high-speed internet that can reach every corner of South Africa probably has a greater economic impact than 30% of Starlink going to Patrice Motsepe.
Think about that, yes.
And what you're doing is much like the VAT issue that we'll get onto now, the budget issue. what we're saying is, sorry, poor people, we're not going to give you access to the internet because we don't like the fact that this guy doesn't have one of our deployed cadres on your board.
Yeah.
We're not once in that particular argument are people understanding that the real victims out of all of this are
of course,
especially rural majority black people who need access to the internet out of the sky. You don't need a fiber, cheap access to the internet.
Yeah, because I mean, offline earlier you were saying we have very high cost of internet in the country.
Oh,
it's bad, Mike.
To people out there that don't quite understand, I've got a daughter just finished university and she lives in England. £20 a month and she has uncapped high-speed data, right, through a SIM card that she bought at the airport, right? None of this Rika nonsense. It's literally card in, high-speed internet, uncapped all day. She does all of her work. She does all of her internet work.
Yeah.
For £20 a month, 500 rand a month, right?
Yeah.
And she's drowning in bandwidth. She could watch me all day. She chooses not to, but anyway. And that's the difference between what a young person can do over there. Over here, yes, if you're rich, you can get an uncapped line, you can get fiber, but it costs you a multiple of the price, and you have to have the house, you have to have the line, you have to have all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right? Over there, it's just a young person with a phone and a SIM card, and away you go. And that's what our government is trying to deny our poor population.
And
is cheap, easy access to the internet, wherever you go.
That is why it concerns me, Mike, when we have the people, especially in politics, the left-wing politics and their followers saying all these policies we have, they are pro-black people. That to me is just, it's misinformation.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about misinformation now. Today, that is misinformation, because these policies are not denying Elon Musk to be here and invest. It's anti-black. It's anti-poor black people. It damages the country. It's a negative for all black people.
But while we're talking about anti-poor black people, nothing is more anti-poor black person than choosing to continue to have a bloated government machinery and SOEs that are losing money because you can deploy a few cadres while you're asking poor people to pay for it with a VAT increase. Now, Pumlani, what do you make of this budget debacle?
Well, firstly, I must say I've seen one of them. I think you do know Dr. Franz Cronje. I think you have him. You've had him on the show. He has been. I think he has had a good point that the non-ANC parties in the GNU must say no to this VAT. There is no need for more taxes, Mike, in South Africa. We're already in the top 4, 5 in terms of the tax burden in the emerging world, right? Mike Sham, who passed away a few years back, the economist, he used to run through these numbers often, right? We have a huge tax burden. We have the taxes are just very high, and it's what has been repressing economic growth as well. It's been a negative factor. You need to relax taxation in South Africa. We are taxed everywhere. You buy something, you are taxed. You fill up your car at the petrol station, you are getting taxed. You have about 45% income tax rate. It's just we are being overtaxed as a nation. And guess what, Mike? When you look at, are we getting what we should be getting? Since we are paying all these taxes, and we even have a very small tax base in the country, right? That is really pushing hard to pay taxes. So for me, the VAT thing is very much not what we need. It's not a taxation that we need in the country. The goal must be the government. The NC government has been very much over the years obsessed with forever wanting to look to where do we get more money from South Africans. They don't ever concern themselves about spending cuts, which is what you touched earlier on the SOEs, the bloated government. Mike, Look at the cabinet that Ramaphosa put together last year in this so-called the government of national unity, which to me, I don't think it was a need. Because Ramaphosa should have made a decision back then, or the ANC, as to which side they go with, right, and if they want to minimize the cabinet. Because we are going to have 10 parties in this government of national unity, and now he wants to accommodate all of them. That's going to cost more to taxpayers. And when they were asked about this, they said it's voters who voted for this. So for me, I just think there is no seriousness in terms of spending cuts. You have to shrink the cabinet. I would go as far as Javier Milei in Argentina. That guy, who I'm sure you do know about him, that guy, he came through with the philosophy of saying, I need to cut the size of government, right? He has been pushing very hard on that. And that's a spirit we need in South Africa. Someone who's going to say, I want to cut down the government, bring privatization in SOEs, reduce taxes, fix things on governance. A lot of corruption, a lot of incompetence, a lot of criminality. Crime alone in South Africa takes about 10% of our gross domestic product. That's the cost of crime in the country. Address all those governance issues. Then you find yourself in a situation where you won't be desperate to forever be wanting to, always looking for money to take from taxpayers. And the VAT thing is not something that will benefit especially the poor people. It's one of those policies that are negative. Again, it comes back to what we are saying. You are raising VAT for the poor, and you keep your cadres in these big SOEs and in this big cabinet. You should be cutting them off so that you address the concerns of the people, and you are not going to address the concerns of the socio-economic challenges of black people who are poor with VAT. So I'm not going to do that, right? So I don't think Ramaphosa the ANC is serious about getting our budget together. They continue with all these programs. Now, Mike, they are speaking, I'm sure you've been reading about that, this so-called transformation fund, where there will be billions of rands being thrown in. And it's another form of some kind of BE, because remember, it will be used to finance black-owned businesses, they say. Who's going to pick on those businesses? Who will choose that this is a good black business to invest in, not this one and that one? It will be a continuation of what we've seen over the years, where these black entrepreneurs are handpicked by the ANC government people, right, as to the money should be put in here and not in there. For me, again, that's not a useful policy. We don't need such huge transformation fund, race-based programs. Should we invest in entrepreneurs? Of course, we should. And it must be all entrepreneurs. They don't have to be race-based.
Yeah, I've actually got some very strong opinions on this, and they may not be may not marry up with the conventional thinking. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Nobody in my family actually works for a corporate or the state, ever. So we've got a long history of starting businesses. And in actual fact, what a business needs, the worst thing that you can do with many businesses is give them money when they're starting.
Money from government.
Money from anyone.
Okay, yeah.
Because, if you look at the failure rate of businesses, most businesses are going to fail, and let them rather make a small financial explosion than a bigger one. What I'm saying is, come out with a good idea. Make sure that there's a market for your idea. And if there is a good business and a market for that idea, the money will find you, right? So in other words, that's why banks have always worked with this thing. It's very frustrating, I know, as a business person myself. You've got to go to a bank and prove that you don't need the money, and then they'll give you the loan, right? That's kind of always been the joke, is that they want to give you an umbrella, which is great. We'll give you the umbrella, but as long as you don't need to use it. And there's a reason for that, and that is that small business and entrepreneurship is more about proving the concept that it works, and then the money will come to you, right? It's
the best idea will attract the investment.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's terrifying, the idea of giving entrepreneurs money. I'm saying give businesses money. In actual fact, don't give businesses money. Build the road, right?
The infrastructure.
Make sure that the electricity stays on.
Yeah.
That's the best way that you can help entrepreneurs. The best way you can help entrepreneurs is to cut the red tape. But in South Africa, we have got a guy by the name of Sipho Nkosi, who may or may not exist, and he was appointed as the red tape cutter about 10 years ago, and he's done nothing.
I wrote a column about that, commending Ramaphosa for appointing him. I haven't heard anything since then. Maybe I need to follow up with the small business.
Look, it is quite a generic name, and maybe there must be many, many Sipho Nkosis in South Africa.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just not the one we think it is.
Yeah.
But we've never heard from him. We've never seen any
Mike,
progress.
I wish with that was, I think that was an important, at least gesture, if I can call it that he appointed Sipho Nkosi, a well-respected CEO in the business world, to say, I task you to look at how we cut regulations. We should have had formal public reports on that a year later. Yeah. If it was a serious president, Mike, he would have come back and held a press conference and say, these are the regulations I've cut. These were the targets. We had aimed to cut X by this time. This is how much we've achieved. Why is he not doing that, Mike?
Well, I don't even know if he's still in the state or not. I don't know if that was just a joke or if actually something happened. But interestingly, I mean, just once again, this just goes to show how out of touch the ANC has traditionally been with the majority of South Africans. And that is that you get a guy from corporate who was a corporate CEO. He was the CEO of
the mining world.
Mining world.
Yeah.
To cut red tape. What does he know about red tape? He's got a department of thousands that deal with the red tape. So he wouldn't even know the red tape if it hit him in the face. Right? You want to go get the guy who runs a small business to tell you about red tape. Not the guy who works for a corporate, because he doesn't know about the red tape. He's got a compliance department, he's got auditors, he's got accountants, he's got lawyers. They deal with the red tape. That guy is so far removed from red tape.
It doesn't
it's sort
understand the pain of red tape.
It just goes to show you how out of touch the ANC is on these issues, that you'd appoint a guy to cut red tape who would never have dealt with red tape in his life. Where is he going to deal with red tape? You know,
he's only, that's an interesting point.
So it's crazy, and like you say, if you're serious about it, then do a Doge kind of thing, do a melee where your cuts are visible. But I don't know if the guy presumably got a fancy office and a big stipend and blue lights or whatever. Never heard of him again. But anyway, the point is that in fact, red tape's been added to.
Yes,
and now the South African economy, as we know, just every year, we kind of get excited and say this year we're going to have 1% growth, and we end up at 0.6% growth when you've got population growth of 1.5%, which means the country's getting poorer by the year.
Yes, and that's been the case over the past 10 years now. And the projections this year, the Minister Kotongwana says it will be 1.9%. The growth this year, that's close to 2%. Now, last year it was 0.6%. The previous year, I think it was not. Was it 0.4
or 5 or something?
Something less than 1%. Yeah. So it's been less than 1%. In fact, the average growth under during Ramaphosa's first term was less than 1%. It was about 0.5%. And you are speaking about the population growth that is much higher than economic growth. So we are a country that is totally, when it comes to the economy, I have been saying this for years now, Mike, and that is, if we were really, I wish we lived in a society where our electorate was really advanced enough to realize that the people we have right now, the fact that we have this high unemployment rate and this dismal economic growth and this sky-high rate of crime, that they kick these people out. The ANC is not supposed to be in power, Mike. Right now, that the ANC is in power it's astonishing itself. How could people who govern over such failure be still in power, right? Be in control of the finance ministry, of the trade and industry ministries. These are very important ministries. How are these people, of the presidency itself? In some advanced democracies, if unemployment is on the wrong direction, your presidency is under threat. So it's been quite concerning to me. I just hope that in 2029 we'll be in a situation where we can see some real change in the country.
Yeah, the interesting thing, of course, is that we and people don't actually understand how close we are, but we might have elections again even as soon as this year. due to this budget crisis.
Oh, the budget crisis. Yeah.
Right. Because, people aren't really aware of the logical next steps. If they can't pass a budget, what happens next? If a budget can't be passed, the obvious next step is a motion of no confidence in the president. And then that follows a motion of no confidence in the next person who gets proposed, etc. And of course, all of the opposition parties are waiting for this opportunity, and that could lead to a point where a president cannot be elected, therefore go back to the polls. It's a lot closer than what people think. I find it astonishing that this is not being discussed further, because we are literally within weeks.
But I don't think the ANC will pull every kind of dirty trick to avoid.
Yeah, but at the end of it all, as they say in the classics, I think it was a great Shakespeare quote, shit got real, when they couldn't pass the budget, because suddenly that was really the moment where, whether they like it or not, you don't have a majority, and if you don't convince enough people to be with you, you will never get the majority. And their attitude has been an interesting one of trying to then fish around for other partners, which sort of tells your GNU partners that maybe it's time to pack up and go. And then it raises its own issues, because we're getting down the realm of saying, okay, if we were to have an election right now, what do the numbers look like? And the most recent polling numbers put the ANC at 32%, and below 30% if Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't head them up. So it's going to be a very, very fascinating time.
Yes,
and not necessarily a comfortable time, because the one thing, as we've seen, is that the economy stalls when you've got this kind of uncertainty out there. The GNU hasn't managed to give anybody any certainty about the economy. This was meant to be the best outcome for the South African economy, which sort of brings you to the question of the opposition parties. How ill prepared are they to run the country? We haven't seen any great suggestion out of the DA.
My view has been that, you see, when the GNU was formed, Mike, this coalition government, I had expected on key fundamental issues. I know it's 6 months now. We can say it's 6 months since the formation of this coalition government. I had expected the country to sort of move. I don't expect South Africa to move to the right. That's not going to happen in this country. But you want to move a bit of left center. We're already on the left, but when I move a bit more to the center, right, on issues like when it comes to land, on issues like NHI, expropriation act, and so on, race-based policies, the fact that there is this thing of this transformation fund that is continuing under this government, this coalition government. For me, I was expecting that there should be breaks now on these policies that, Mike, we do know they've been pursued since over the past 30 years of our democracy, and we have been going in the wrong direction, right? Well, so the welfare kind of culture, it's not being reduced. We're not moving a bit to the center. And my argument has been that since this GNU has started, I haven't seen anything significant that shows that there's a shift in policy in the country, and that there's certainty. I'm not seeing that, and that to me is concerning, because I was expecting a new sort of path than the one we've had before.
Now, Phumlani, I want to ask you, and as we sort of lead here, as we sort of wind down. In your own estimation, you've done a lot of research. You must have done a lot of research for your book. We've got a situation in South Africa where you talk about left-leaning policies. You need to have left-leaning citizens that like the idea of left-leaning policies, right? You look at America as a good example. Now, the last election showed us that they're far more comfortable with right-leaning policies than left-leaning policies. Is there anything in your experience, either life experience or your research, that shows that the majority of South Africans, i.e. black people, want to live in this communist utopia, or that's their natural habitat. Because it seems to me, observation, and right here I'll go with some of the work done by Frans Cronje and others, that by and large socially South Africans are quite conservative. They're quite fond of the free market. They're quite ambitious. They like owning their own property. Do you think that that kind of research has it wrong and South Africans actually want to live in Cuba?
That's a very, very, yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? There seems to be a dystopia here, as far as I'm saying, because the ANC, the more they push left-leaning policies, the more their support declines. Right? So I'm trying to see, why is it in our heads we feel that the majority of the population like those policies?
Well, the thing is, just to give context to what you are saying, there have been surveys, right? There have been surveys, and there's also been anecdotal sort of events, including media interviews I have seen, right? They start with the anecdotal sort of data point. There was one, as we celebrated 30 years last year, ENCA went to Sentin and asked people there whether we should have race-based policies, at 30 years into our democracy. People said no. I mean, out of the 90% of the people interviewed, they said no. You look at, they did another interviews in KwaZulu-Natal, where they spoke to people around what matters to you as we head to the election. This was before the election next year. And people spoke about their businesses, that they would love to have, growing their businesses. They would love to have safety and security in their communities. Crime is a problem. They spoke about infrastructure, Mike, that the bridges are not working. We have dysfunctional schools. Now, that doesn't strike me as people who lean toward the communist side, right, or socialist side. And then there is some data as well that has been done where people are being asked as to what matters to you, what should be the priority for the government, right, at this point. Guess what? What is being raised by organizations like the EFF, that it is land, it's land. It's not even in the top 5 of those in the priority list. People talk about, good service delivery, countering, crime and so on, job creation. That's what people talk about. And the Institute of Race Relations, they've done some work around checking as to, do people favor BE, race-based policies, or not. It's a small percentage of black people who say we are for BE. They want merit, right? So the society is, and I'm sure you've been watching KwaZulu-Natal, where this Kwanazi guy is being hailed for being tough on criminals.
Yeah, he's the police chief in KZN. He's been really tough on crime.
On crime, yeah. Isn't that more of a conservative view of how crime should be addressed? So South Africans are very much a bit of a conservative society. Now, there's this thing then maybe I want your comment on this. If you total up, the majority of the vote still goes to the parties that are advocating for these leftist organizations, right? If you add the MK party, the EFF, and the ANC, where you can say they are more on the left, they still have the majority of the vote, right? Now, my argument, you can jump in here. My view has been that even though South Africans, they are very much not pro-communism and pro-socialist and very much obsessed with land and so on, as per the data shows, people, I still think they vote for the people they sort of relate to. That's what I'm noticing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, and I want to hear your view. People still vote for the people that they relate sort of with, right? Even though can be this crazy policy around land and so on, and it's not a priority in their lives, but I'm gonna, the way Malema talks, the way he speaks my language, speaks the accent he understands my culture, I relate with this guy, and then they vote. I'm not sure it's really about policy when it comes to voting.
Yeah, look, I think we've got to separate the issues. Yeah. I think that if Malema speaks my language was so successful, then his party would have been more successful than what it has been. I'm saying there's always, in any society, there's a fringe, and he's got the totality of the fringe.
Yeah.
MK is a totally different beast. I think it means different things to different people.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with the fact that I think that it was seen as two things. It was the natural successor to representative of the Zulu nation. In the same time, in the aftermath of the king dying, Buthelezi dying, Jacob Zuma out, all the Zulu candidates at the ANC elective conference not winning. Not one of them won. They were available for 7 positions. They got naught. I think you had a wounded, very nationalistic Zulu culture that were happy to find a home. The story there is whether they are a traditionalist, monarchist party or a gangster party or a communist party a la Floyd Shivambu. I think they're going to fall between the cracks. But as you had for many years when Buthelezi presided over an ever-shrinking IFP, I think that's the future of MK, because I think they don't mean anything to anybody. You know, you used to have Buthelezi making great speeches, but then all the IFP councillors being corrupt. So I think you're going to have the same problem there. And then I think that you've got 2 issues, the main issues that people must start understanding. I think that there's a lot of people who over the year became accustomed to handing over. I view the ANC as being in two parts. One part being the patronage part, which is probably, I don't know, a third of the ANC, and 2/3 being people who have surrendered their control to the ANC 30 years ago and don't feel enabled to get their control. We don't know how many of those people are actually, my feeling is the majority of them are conservative, but they don't feel the option. Of course, the biggest block are those that didn't vote. And I have the feeling that those are the people that want those conservative party that represent those conservative values, but it must be in the form of black leadership, charismatic black leadership. And I'm not inventing this, or this isn't out of hope. This is what has happened in Zambia. This is what happened in Botswana. This is what happened in Namibia. This is what nearly happened in Mozambique. And I think that if that entity comes along, not an entity, for example, like Rise Mzansi that says, we're just the ANC, we'll just be nicer.
Yeah, and
we're just the ANC,
version of
we'll
the
just
ANC.
do it nicer.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a party that says, we hear you. It's the same thing that happened in the States with the emergence of Donald Trump. It's the same thing that happened in Italy with Giorgia Meloni. It's the same thing that happened in Argentina with Milei, where I'm talking about them as disparate societies, and I've given you all the examples of where it's happened in Africa already. I think this is where the world goes, and South Africa's playing catch up. We're a little bit sheltered in South Africa. I think we think that the world ends at the Limpopo. But yeah. So, Phumlani, what we're going to do now is we're going to end this conversation, and thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure, sir.
We're going to ask a few questions for our community so that people can pop over to our State of the Nation channel. If you're a member, we're going to hold just Phumlani here for a few more minutes. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Pace Car Rental that sponsor us and subscribe to the State of the Nation. Phumlani Madjozi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Thank you.